Hello and welcome everyone to the June edition of VolunteerMatch Solutions Best Practice Network webinar. I'm Casey Brennan from VolunteerMatch and will be moderating our session today. We have two fantastic guest speakers on the line today, Susan and John from Fenton, an integrated communications firm based in New York. Susan and John will be joining us today to explain why social media is so important to achieving corporate responsibility goals, and will be teaching us a user-friendly approach to measuring and maximizing the impact of those social media efforts. So before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone how you can ask questions today. You have two options. You can type questions into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen throughout the presentation, or you can also submit questions to us on Twitter using the hashtag VMBPN and sending that to the attention of @VM_solutions. We're going to save all of our questions until the end of the session today, but please send those throughout as they come to you. And I also just wanted to remind everyone that we will be sending a copy of the slides out to all of you as follow-up tomorrow, along with a recording of the presentation. So without further delay, I'm going to pass the session over to Susan to kick us off. Welcome, Susan. And Susan, are you on the line?
I am now on the line. You know how we do this with conference calling. We accidentally have the mute button on when we shouldn't. So good morning and good afternoon for everybody who's joining us today. And thank you so very much, Casey, and thank you to VolunteerMatch for this tremendous opportunity. I'm Susan McPherson. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Fenton, wearing a lot of different hats, but spend a lot of time in the corporate social responsibility world. And for the next hour, we'll just call it CSR to make things more expedited. And I also look after our marketing, and joining me is my wonderful colleague John Gordon, who heads up all of our digital work firm-wide. So I'm going to push ahead to the first slide and asking you the big question and asking the audience, is your company using social media to engage around your corporate social responsibility? And we're going to be going through why that is a tremendous opportunity for you all, but more importantly, how do you know whether your efforts are worthwhile and what kind of return on investment can you be looking to report? And we look forward to your questions at the end or during. So next slide.
And Susan, I just launched that poll so that everyone can show us their responses. So we'll give everyone about 10 more seconds to respond, and about 5 more seconds, and then I will show you the results of who on the line is already using social media engaged with corporate responsibility.
You got to love this technology. It's awesome.
I know. So I'm going to go ahead and close it now and then share that with everybody on the line. So you should see the responses now.
Okay, well, 64% of you are, so you're on the money, guys. You're doing a good job, and 36% are a little bit slower to the table, but I think for both those of you who said yes or no, I think you'll find some valuable information from which to utilize from the next 45 minutes or so. So next slide, number 5. Engaged employees, greater transparency, consumer feedback, communicating impact, and measuring results. These are just some of the many reasons why companies are increasingly using social media to bolster their corporate responsibility goals. But with so many metrics and platforms to choose from, determining the right strategy for increasing and measuring engagement quickly gets muddled and complicated. Next slide. So to start, let's highlight why CSR and social media go together like PB&J. And I shouldn't have put that slide because I haven't eaten lunch and I'm hungry. But the marriage between social media and CSR is not only positive, but it's vital to start building a globally conscious and highly regarded brand. Next slide. A 2011 Reputation Institute survey found that a company's CSR program in its broadest sense can be responsible for more than 40% of a company's reputation, while companies with stronger social leadership programs have 55% better internal morale and a 43% more efficient business processes. This is added to the fact that highly engaged employees have 3 times the operating margin. Now that is some pretty powerful data. For examples of brands succeeding at this approach, I highlighted, or I gave shout outs to Starbucks, 7th Generation, Cisco, their getideas.org platform, and Unilever. Next slide. So we often use social media. I think all of us well, not all of us, but 99% of the population now is using social media for personal reasons. And I just heard a statistic that in August there'll be 5 billion people on Facebook. Well, we have 7 billion people on the planet, so that gives you the size and enormity. But, you know, we use it for personal reasons, we use it for political, and of course commercial reasons. But CSR combines all 3 of these interests and allows us to become active on the issues that we care about. The amplification of CSR through social media allows companies to be good corporate citizens while raising awareness for a particular issue or cause that they support or their employees support. So the next few slides I'm dedicating to 5 top tips that will enable you to maximize your CSR and social media efforts. And hopefully the preceding slides gave you some background information of why it's important to really join these 2. So the first is something that I've learned very from the ground up myself over the last couple of years, but it's really important for companies to lead from the top and the bottom. C-level, C-suite buy-in is absolutely vital, and it gives legitimacy to any program that a company engages in. But engagement must spread throughout the organization to all employees, regardless of their position. Traditionally, communications, or up until the last probably 10 years, communications was one way only. Now everyone in a corporation, in a company, and in a small business has a voice. And more importantly, though, and we'll get to this in the second half of this webinar, we have 2 ears for a reason, meaning we should be listening twice as much as we're shouting and speaking, although I'm not listening very much right now while I'm talking. Next slide. So social, oh, I'm sorry.
This is Susan's colleague, John. I just wanted to back up some of the points that Susan is making in her top 5 tips. And I think one of the common misconceptions as we have a conversation about social media and CSR for that matter is that we often think about social in terms of the tools and platforms. We think about Facebook and we think about Twitter. But one of the things that we like to remind our clients is that social is not about these things. It's not about the individual tools. It is a radically different approach to business. No social media program is going to succeed unless a business chooses to become a more social business. And so what does it mean to truly become a social business? Next slide. Here's our the rundown. A truly social business knows that they no longer own the conversation about their brand. This is a radical transformation that's happened, I think, in the last couple of years. If you draw a giant circle of the conversation around your brand, you used to own that circle. You used to be responsible for the advertising and the PR that was responsible for starting the conversations around your brand. Now, conversations are ongoing, and you need to participate in those conversations. You are a participant now. And that's what it means to be social and to be a social organization. The second quality of a truly social business is that you listen to your stakeholders, that you're paying attention to what they say. You're setting up the channels for them to communicate, and you're engaging them in an honest and authentic dialogue. It's not about broadcasts. It's not about pushing out to the world that you're a wonderful organization with wonderful products or services. It's about listening to what your customers and stakeholders say. And the third one is engaging them in this ongoing conversation. The conversation is happening over and over and over, every minute, every second of the day. And you need to be paying attention to what people are saying, what your employees are saying, what your customers are saying, what all shareholders are saying. And I think the fourth point is something that that people often overlook, is that you have to give as you get. The value proposition in social media continually needs to be redefined. So you need to understand what it is that people are talking about and what they want, and offer them things. Offer them some incentives, not just necessarily traditional incentives, but invite them into how you develop your CSR program. Invite them into kind of understanding and defining the value that they get out of it. And I think this is a really, really important step in becoming a truly social business, is that you have to bring your stakeholders into an honest conversation and get them invested in what you're doing, so that they can go out and become champions of your brand and champions of your cause.
Next slide. So leading or coming off of what John said, my second tip was be consistent. You know, we don't get up in the morning and go to work and say, I'm going to do a little CSR on social media today. It's got to be baked into every communication that you do every day. Communications around tasks, communications around marketing. Set up hashtags to follow and engage in the Twitter sphere and the blogosphere, such as CSR, sustainability, and corporate citizenship.
So being consistent means being consistent in your messages, but it also means being consistent in your approach and your pursuit of your goals. All of your activities and programs and engagements should be in pursuit of a stated, realistic, measurable goal. And one of the things I hear a lot from CSR folks is that they talk about the difficulties of measuring the impacts of their effort. Usually the conversation centers around measuring employee engagement, reputation enhancement, things like that. And I hear a lot of people talk about how difficult it is to measure that. Well, those are very measurable outcomes. The trick is to recognize from the beginning what it is that you're trying to do, what it is that you're trying to achieve, what the needle you're trying to move, and then develop your program, your CSR program, and your social media programs to be in pursuit of those goals. We developed a program, a white paper called See, Say, Feel, Do, that the attempt was to kind of create a structure that allowed people to both plan and measure the outcomes of their communications effort, and specifically their social media effort. And the most important metric was the do metric, and it is the do metric. The do metric, again, is the thing that you're asking people to do. And it all starts there. From the do metric, you ask yourself, who's going to do this thing? And then you work backwards from there. You ask, who's going to do it? What do we want them to do? Where are they? And what do we need to develop to get them to do that thing? And it is a constant churn and a constant process. But everything you do should be in pursuit of that goal, that measurable goal. Everything should be focused on the do metric. Everything else is basically a KPI, a key performance indicator. So a lot of people get enamored with likes and retweets and things like that. If that's your ultimate goal, then those are great and critical things to measure. But mostly they should just be indicators of performance pointing towards your ultimate goal.
We now have another poll. Casey, are you going to run that?
I am. So this question is about how people on the line are currently measuring their success for their programs.
So go ahead and click on the answers. And I love this. I think this is great technology, Casey.
I like it too.
It's immediate satisfaction.
Yes. So I'm going to give everyone about 10 more seconds to submit their a response to the poll. Again, we're looking at in what ways you're measuring your success in social media. And I'm going to go ahead and close it now and share the results with you.
Let's see. So 33% are using survey and polling, 9% one-on-one questions. Well, that makes sense. Media clipping, imprints, 19%, all of the above. Okay, well, that's good. It's informative. You know, John mentioned the CSA Field Do report or white paper that Fenton published, and I just want to give a very quick shout out that that's available free of charge on our website, www.fenton.com. And it can be used for any type of program that you're trying to measure, obviously for the purpose of this webcast, CSR, programs, employee engagement, etc. But it's just a great template that you can be utilizing to measure all sorts of projects that you're working online or offline. So when and if time permits, I encourage you to take a download of that. So next slide. Yeah.
And Susan, I'm happy to send that out in the follow-up email. I'll send everyone a link to that report so that they can download it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Casey. So number 3 is obviously something I think that most of you know, that communicating and sharing are the benefits that social media provide. And certainly by communicating and sharing, you are able to keep everyone up to date with the good work that your company is doing. But it's also, they are very good platforms that are out there, the Twitters of the world, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns, to also talk candidly about your business and where you're going. We had talked earlier about the importance of transparency. And you want to be transparent in the good times and the less than good. Showcase what you're doing in CSR. Showcase others that you admire. Shout out to peer companies that may be doing innovative work that you think deserves such. And then participate in chats and CSR chats that are held online. They're great learning opportunities, and such public forums allow you to learn from others, innovate, and improve. So, next slide. Next slide.
So I think it's a really, hello?
You're on, John.
Sorry. Sorry. Susan makes a really important point here about sharing. I think a lot of times when people think about social media and participate in social media, they forget the first word. They forget about social, and they forget what it means to be social. And social media shouldn't mean anything different than it means in the rest of our lives. The party metaphor is used to death when we talk about social media, but you really should. It's really, I think, a great metaphor, because when you think about social media and you make the translation to a party, you know, what would happen if you went to the cocktail party and only talked about yourself and ordered people to do things? Obviously, you would not be very popular at that party. People would be shying away from you and not too interested in what you have to say. Social media is a very, very simple thing, and everybody has the instincts to do it right because they do it in the rest of their life. There is a very simple formula that people should use to approach social media. That's the next slide. You have to listen. You have to listen to what people are saying. You have to listen for a very long time before you join the conversation. You have to understand who's talking, what are they saying, what is the meaning behind what they're saying, what's the tone, what's the language. And then you begin to ask people. You ask them, what do you mean by that? What can we do for you? What's the, you know, what is it that interests you? Why do you feel that way? And then you need to relate to them. You need to relate to them that you understand exactly what they're saying, and then you need to add value to the conversation. You need to participate in a way where people feel like you're an active partner. You're sharing, you're communicating, you are providing value to whatever it is that they find important. Listen, ask, relate, and add value.
So well, I'm curious, and we maybe this is the next poll at the next webinar, but I'm wondering if those of you who aren't doing social media, is it a lack of investment from the standpoint of resources? Do you just merely don't have enough time or staff or colleagues to enable kind of the time it takes to invest in utilizing the social media platforms? Companies traditionally focus much of their attention on their sales channel, and rightfully so. In today's economy, it seems almost unavoidable. But it's crucial to allocate internal resources to an ongoing CSR social media effort. It'll pay you back dividends in enhancing your brand and enhancing your relationships with your stakeholders. If at all possible, it makes sense to hire individual team players to grow and properly develop a strategy for your company's CSR efforts. That's just my 2 cents.
And going back to Susan's first point, first tip, if brands want to authentically embrace CSR and social media, it needs to be baked into every part of the brand. These, often both kind of get marginalized as separate channels or lines in an org chart. But they're not things you do. CSR and social media are who you are. It needs to be your brand. You need to ask, are we going to authentically embrace social responsibility and a social culture, or are we going to fake it? As I mentioned earlier, you're no longer in control of the conversation around your brand. So if you do try to fake it, if it's not an authentic part of who you are as an organization or as an authentic part of your brand, you're going to get called out on it, and that will damage your reputation. So it can't drive home the point enough that both CSR and social media, they're not things. They are how you engage people to talk about what it is you're doing. So if it's not authentic, if it's not real, and if it's not a part of every touch point with your customer, with your employees, with your other stakeholders, then it's just not going to ring true, and you're not going to be very successful at communicating who you are as a brand or organization.
So to galvanize what John was saying, you really want your customers to be your greatest salespeople. You want to give them the kind of impetus and ensure that they understand what you are doing from a CSR perspective. Doing good can actually be very good for your business, but more importantly, making sure that everyone knows you're doing good can even be better. So enable the channels of communication not only to be focused outside of your company, but also within your company, so that the entire employee populations are well aware of your corporate responsibility programs.
And they not only need to understand, they need to be involved. And they need to not just be involved when you decide that they should be involved to help you. They should be involved in helping create what it is that is going to be your social responsibility program. Again, I can't emphasize enough the idea that social media and social responsibility need to be social. That is a critical part of success when you're thinking about both. You need to kind of take off your communicator's hat and put on your employee hat or your customer hat and think about ways beyond Facebook or Twitter and the tools and platforms, ways that I can get involved in an authentic way, ways that where I'm not communicating that telling you that I'm a socially responsible business, I'm engaging you and bringing you into the fold to help create that social responsibility, to help create that program, to help do good in the world. It's not about the brand broadcasting to the world that we are responsible. It's about the brand being responsible. And to do that, you need to bring your both your employees, your customers, and all the rest of your stakeholders along for the ride.
These unmute and mute buttons are getting confusing. My apologies, everybody. So, we kind of threw out a lot of information, and we're looking forward to your questions. But, one of the things is kind of my mantra in life. You need to have fun doing all of this. And we just put up a slide showing kind of the fun we use that Fenton does here by using our Facebook page to engage staff across our 5 offices. But we do it because we want to show it's a fun place to work. Truly, it's an authentic expression kind of our culture and our staff. And you all have different cultures. You all have different companies. But I have to believe that if you're still at your company, you're also having fun. So, use these tools to share those community-type activities that you are doing. And I know many of you on the phone today are involved in corporate volunteering programs. And obviously, VolunteerMatch is an incredible leader at that. So they can provide you tools to help engage your staff and showcase that to the world. But I do want to add that cadre of fun. You've got to make sure that it's authentic and true and indeed truly fun. So next slide. Casey, do you want to take this one?
Are we on the one of your Facebook page and your employee programs?
Nope, the VolunteerMatch one. You stay informed. Number 27.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, we're going to quickly just take your questions now. So thanks to everyone who has submitted questions so far. Susan and John, we have a few already on the docket, but if anybody else has other questions they want to post to Susan or John, please submit those through the question box, and we'll get to as many of these as we can. Excuse me. Susan and John, I have a quick question that goes to that last tip, which is about making it fun. I've often heard organizations who deal in social media recommend that when a company is getting started and encouraging their employees to use social media for a company program, they recommend having a policy around how employees should talk in social media about the program. Is a policy something that you both would recommend, or does that take the fun out of it?
Well, I can take that, and Don can certainly chime in. I mean, companies that are publicly traded have to have some sorts of rules, because obviously if information is shared that is considered material according to the SEC and such, it could get the company into a lot of trouble. So I do believe in setting up some sort of kind of do's and don'ts, but it doesn't have to be so restrictive. And I'm happy, to share some social media plans and policies that I've come across that have been extraordinarily fair and reasonable, but not so restrictive that it kind of stops or prevents creativity on the part of the employee. But I think, again, it goes back to the company's culture. If you've never had policies for things like leave time and sick time and such, it would be very unusual for the company to go ahead and have a social media policy. But if it is a major corporation or a publicly traded company that has certain, IP that it must protect and things, I could understand. Then in that case, it most certainly is needed. John, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would just add that most businesses have some sort of code of conduct policy that applies to their employees in the general day-to-day world and in the office, and that there's those rules probably apply to social media as well. So it just in terms of being respectful and being worrying about company secrets and things like that. So, I think a social media policy is a good thing, because one, it tells your employees that you're on board with them having a voice and participating in social media, but it very much should be not a giant list of what things you shouldn't do. It should be a mix of just kind of good practice and the things that you should talk about. And you should, beyond the policy itself, when people are doing a good job in social media, it should be recognized. It should be part of the culture in such a way that when people are doing an effective job of communicating your brand via social media, that's something that's recognized and rewarded. So a social media policy should, like I said, should not just be a big list of don'ts. It should be a roadmap for how employees should successfully engage on social media. And then when people do that, that should be recognized and rewarded as well.
Well, and if I can just add, engage your employees to help you create the policy, because they're the closest to the outside world.
Yeah, it sounds like the fun might come in actually, drafting the fun into the policy. So as John said, don't just put the don'ts, but put the do's and think about ways that you can kind of incorporate that fun aspect into the actual rules and regulations around that program. I really like that point a lot. We have a question about how do you draw the line, and again, in the past, communication has been one way, you guys mentioned that, but how do you draw the line between communicating the work that you're doing in communities via social media channels, and how do you draw the line between doing that effectively and just bragging? Can you guys speak to that question a little bit?
I definitely can understand that concern, and it's funny, over the past couple of years I would talk to companies that for their entire history have been extraordinarily humble, and if anything they have been reticent in sharing their community relations and their philanthropy, but what they're recognizing today is there's such value to sharing that information, and the reward to sharing that information, of course, is a much more positive reputation. But there is that fine line, and I think it's something that we all naturally or unnaturally maybe have to adapt. I mean, we want to share when we win an award personally, but how do you share that you won an award without sounding like you're boasting? So there is a bit of an art and science to doing it in such a way that is factual without being braggadocious. I think one of the most effective ways also to showcase a company's good work is to let the work speak for itself. And for instance, if you are providing a grant from a corporate foundation to an organization, have the organization speak on your behalf as opposed to you talking about it. Also, this goes back to what we were talking about, engaging your employees. Provide the information to your employees so that they can be talking about it and not just the corporate communications or the corporate social responsibility department. John, would you like to add?
I would add, I think that all is right. I would add too, though, that again, if the authentic pursuit of your corporate responsibility is social good, then there is an inherent value in communicating the work that you're doing. And it's not telling the world how great you are because it's the thing you've done. It's elevating your cause. And using the reach and channels you have to elevate the cause that you're supporting is a wonderful thing. So it's less about us, and look how great we are. It's more about, hey, look at this wonderful thing that we're supporting, the great work of this organization, the great work of this cause, the importance of this mission, whatever it is. A truly responsible business is using all of its powers to kind of elevate that cause and show that responsibility. So it is a matter, I think, of kind of taking a step back from traditional communications where you are broadcasting the details of the event or the action or whatever it is that you're trying to put out in the world, and use the platform reach and channels that you have available to kind of more broadly communicate the goals of social good.
And I'm going
to just tag on to.
I was just going to make one point I wanted to point out to everyone on the line that I've actually been following Susan on Twitter for a very long time now, and I would encourage you all to follow her and even observe her actions, because I think Susan does, as she spoke about this art of the line between one-way communications and bragging about yourself and actually engaging in a dialogue. And I think Susan does a really fantastic job at this. I always know about Susan's successes and her wins, but I never feel like that's all that she's talking about. So, learn by listening in that way, and Susan's a great person to start with.
Can you see me blushing? Thank you. That was like the nicest thing anybody has said. Lovely. Thank you, Casey. I say this all the time. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we're speaking, although that is not evident by this webinar, since we can't hear anybody else but ourselves. But hopefully, it's provoking some good conversations. So, are there more questions, Casey?
There are. So there is a question about, is the strategy or the value proposition different when you're looking to engage consumers versus employees via social media? A lot of times the companies that VolunteerMatch works with in particular, they have offices all over the country or all over the world, and they don't necessarily have that in-house touch for employees, but maybe they want to use social media as a tool to get them involved in some of the CSR efforts and programs that they're putting out there. So is there a difference in how you go about using social media, and is there different ways to measure success in that?
Yeah, and I think it all comes back to what we talked about, the do metric. What is it that you're trying to achieve? So if you're trying to engage your employees towards some end, then that's a very specific outcome that you would set up a very measurable response. If it's volunteerism or repeat volunteerism or community service, that's something that's very easy to measure over time, and you would set up a very specific strategy to achieve that goal. You'd understand where your employees, what kind of social media platforms are they using? How can certain influencers within your business, bring other people along and recruit other folks? You would set your plan based on the outcome, and this goes the same with customer engagement as well. Understand what it is that you want customers to do, and set up the plan to reach them based on where they are, who they listen to, what motivates them, and reward them. And when you're dealing with customers, one of the best things to do is, kind of a twofer, is obviously use your employees to be advocates on behalf of your objectives as well. So again, it all comes back to the idea of what it is, the outcome that you're trying to achieve, and developing a very specific plan to achieve that goal based on who it is that you want to do the thing you want them to do.
That's great. And actually, John and Susan, we've gotten a couple questions about specific metrics. And again, I guess we're talking to both we're concerned with both consumer and employee measurement, but are there sort of just general best practices about what you should track? Should you be tracking the number of followers you have? Should you be tracking the number of fans you have? Or should you be tracking the number of actions? Or maybe you're building in another layer where there's a call to action and you can actually see how many people signed up for your event or how many people downloaded your white paper. What are some of the commonly accepted measurements that are good for all of us as a starting point?
That's a great question, Casey, and I'll jump in and then pass it over to John since he's the real measurement guru. But you're going to hear him say that it really depends what is the activity you're wanting from people. In the scenario, we talked about Discovery Channel and what an incredible job they do in engaging employees in volunteer projects around the world. Well, you can imagine when they set that program up, they most likely, one of the clear terms of measurement was how many employees are volunteering, and maybe a second measurement of what has been the impact on the particular nonprofits in terms of fundraising or in terms of awareness of those particular nonprofits. But I'll turn it over to John so he can go into more detail.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The only metric that matters is the metric that you define as success, and typically you want to set up, if you have an idea and a plan and a strategy that you're attempting to execute, you do want to set up some kind of scenario that allows you to measure that outcome. So if it is something like volunteerism, obviously that's a metric that's a little bit more measurable. If it is, if it is your white paper, then downloads and mentions of that white paper may be a good measure of influence, or how far it actually reaches. Things like follower counts and retweets and all of that, those could be really, really important indicators of success towards that outcome, or they could be red herrings. I've worked with clients in the past who've been very, very proud of the fact that they have a high fan count on Facebook, but then when I asked them what they were trying to do, and they said, well, our audience is, women 34 to 54 here in the United States, and then, we looked under the hood and realized that most of the people they were engaging were teenagers in India, then you kind of realize, well, that high fan count really, while it seems impressive, really is not serving their end goal, which was to get donations from this very specific group. So again, just emphasize, draw like three underlines under this. Define what it is, the outcome that you want, set up a way to measure that, and then develop your social media plan that drives that outcome. And pay attention to what's working, what's not working. Are those, is the fan count really, really critical to achieving that goal? Maybe it's not. But if you haven't defined the outcome you're looking to achieve, then you're really never going to know.
And John, on that point, do you have any recommended listening tools or management tools to kind of be capturing all that insight about a social media program?
Well, obviously Facebook has its own insights that is probably the best tool for measuring your effectiveness on Facebook. We use a lot of different tools, and we find that based on the situation, different tools are kind of more important. When we're looking to kind of track performance in real time, one of the most effective tools we use is called Topsy, which allows you to kind of track influence in the moment. So, you have your clouts and things like that define people as influencers, but in any given situation, anybody can be an influencer. Somebody could say something in the right voice and the right message, and even though they have, a tiny number of followers, suddenly they become a very influential person in this conversation. And you wouldn't know it if you just kind of looked at their clout number. But if you use a tool like Topsy, you can see, wow, a lot of people are responding to what this one person has to say on this subject. So, a lot of tools we use and they're very, very situation specific. But one of the things that we emphasize over and over again is that tools are indicators of performance. They kind of can tip your eyes and your mind to look out for things. But what ultimately the most important tool is your brain. The most important tool is actually paying attention to what people are saying, to kind of decipher the words they're using, to understand their motivations. So you want to set up situations where you elicit that feedback from people, where you elicit that participation, so that people are commenting. You are setting up situations where you're kind of motivating a response, and that response is an indicator of success. But the words that people use, whatever it is that they choose to kind of latch onto, that's really, really important information when you're continuing to define what your communication strategy. It can really, really help you pick the right words, pick the right audiences, and pick the right tone going forward. So, there are a lot of great tools that can be used. I would recommend there's a program called TRACS, TRA .CX that we use as a kind of enterprise level community management and listening tool. That seems to be, for us, one of the most effective tools out there and has a great kind of intuitive user interface.
Awesome. A lot of information, John. Thank you so much. We have one other question just about when, often in social media we have so many different audiences that we might be talking to, or in our communications plan internally we might have a lot of different stakeholders that we want to involve with our CSR program, information. So when it comes to social media, do you have recommendations about possibly segmenting that audience into, maybe different fan pages, or how do you get the right messages to the right people so that you're not sending out a bunch of mixed messages that, one might be for the consumer audience, another might be specifically for the employee audience, or one might be for investors or grantees. How do you what's your recommendation or thoughts about that and sort of managing those multiple audiences that exist in social media?
Well, my recommendation on that would be to go, hey, there are the channels that you own. So if you have a Facebook page, if you have a Twitter handle, it becomes very hard to kind of appeal to everyone through a single channel. But the great thing about social media is that you're not the only game in town. So there are existing communities out there, fully formed, large active communities of people who have organized themselves very much in the same way that you're probably trying to target them. So one of the most important points about social media is not just to be a source and to be the kind of deliverer of information, but one of the most effective ways you can kind of communicate your message is to participate in these existing communities. So if you go out and find, the Facebook page, the message board, the blog, whatever it is that is frequented by your target audience, become an active participant in that community, and that way you can deliver the right message to the right audience and ask them to do the right thing. But again, you don't want to just show up one day and say, hey, come over here now, we have an important message about us. If your audience is critical to your ongoing work, you definitely want to know where those people are and become an active participant in that community. So the advice would not to try to set up your own channels and always have everybody play in your backyard, but to go over to your neighbor's house from time to time and become an active member and participant in existing communities.
That's great advice, John. I really like that we're pointing out that it's, again, in our broadcast mode, it's not just retweeting people, it's going into those LinkedIn groups and participating in the discussions, maybe drawing things back from your own experience or your own company, initiatives, but really kind of being a participant in those channels. One other thing I wanted to give a shout out to, Susan, I remember that earlier in the discussion you mentioned sometimes just getting your feet wet and starting to participate, and I'm thinking specifically about Twitter, because often a lot of us are very scared to get started on Twitter because it's really overwhelming. As soon as you follow more than 50 people, there's so much activity happening. And I think specifically for CSR practitioners, one of the greatest ways and one of my favorite things to participate in is actually Susan hosts a CSR chat. And Susan, you'll have to remind me if it's every 2 weeks or every month. But she has a guest sort of Twitter chat person that we're posing questions to, and it offers an opportunity for a lot of people who might not know each other in real life to come together around a specific topic area. So yesterday I was participating in Susan's CSR chat about corporate philanthropy, and she had a member of CECP's staff answering questions about some of the research that they had just conducted and some of the insights from that. And it allowed us all to get into really real conversations about what corporate philanthropy means, what best practices are. So that's one chat that I participate in that I would recommend everyone else keep an eye out. Susan, can you tell us when the next one of those is coming up?
I'm happy to. It's every other Wednesday, so it would be 2 weeks ahead from yesterday, which I don't have a calendar up in front of me, but it must be the second week of July, that Wednesday. And it's always at 3 to 4 o'clock Eastern time and p.m. It's 3 to 4 o'clock p.m., of course. And on our website, there is a whole schedule of the remainder of covering the remainder of the year of different topics. And as Casey said, we always, or we try to always bring on a guest to talk about a particular program. And we've featured Microsoft's CSR team. We had Novo Nordisk's CSR team. We had one session on conflict minerals, which is a big issue for tech firms in corporate responsibility. We've had things on supply chain, or talks on supply chain. But I think, Casey, you made mention of what is the most important, or one of the best features of it and of the chat, and that is finding others who have similar interests as you, so that you can then go to them for consider them resources, and be able to check out the good work that they are doing as well. So I look at these chats as not an opportunity for me to pass on information, but more to kind of harvest the good information and the good activities that are happening in the CSR community.
Absolutely. And I would also just point out that, you know, conflict minerals isn't necessarily something that VolunteerMatch is concerned with day to day. However, it's a great way for me as an individual to get informed about the issues that are important to companies and kind of get a more well-rounded view of what's happening in CSR right now, and what are people concerned with, and how does that affect the work that I'm doing day to day. So again, just a great way to collaborate with others. So that's just one example of a great listening and participation tool. So as you listen, maybe eventually you'll start participating in those chats. And Susan, maybe what we can do is I can get a link to that schedule and send that out as well as a follow-up. So for the third of the people who are on the line who haven't started yet with social media for their CR, maybe that can be a great way for them to get started.
Absolutely, and I'll also put in some other chats that might be also informative and helpful.
That would be great. So we just have a few minutes left, and I think we got through most of our questions, but if any others are pending for Susan and John, I'll definitely send those along to them. But I just wanted to thank everyone for listening in today. This has been a really fantastic discussion, and thank you for all your questions. Just wanted to remind everyone about ways that you can stay informed about, and specifically our social media channels here at VolunteerMatch, about how you can stay informed about these discussions that we have once a month. So on our blog, volunteeringiscsr.org, we always post upcoming events and also have a schedule on our website. And then you can always follow us on Twitter, that's at VM_solutions, to kind of stay up to date. And you know, we try ourselves to be good at this, so we hope that all of you will interact with us as well. And again, Susan and John's Twitter handles were on the slides as well. So definitely stay in touch with us to stay informed about the events that are coming up. And also, just for next month, we actually have yet another, this is the Summer of Social Media, we have another session that's about you know, social media strategies, but specifically tailored to small to medium-sized businesses. So for those of you on the line that are looking for a little bit of a smaller start, Julie Dixon from the Center for Social Impact Communication at Georgetown University is going to be coming to talk to us about some research in a paper that she published that's specifically tailored to small to medium-sized businesses. So we hope you'll join us for that. Susan and John, thank you both so much for joining us today and, you know, teaching us how to get started and how to really optimize what it is that we're doing in corporate social responsibility to our audiences. So thank you so much for all the resources and your thoughts, and we look forward to reading your full report about the CSA, now I'm going to forget the name.
CSA Field Do.
CSA Field Do. Yeah, I'm already forgetting the process. But thank you so much for joining us and for giving us all your time today. And thanks to everyone on the line for joining.
Thank you.